Sair Solejit Choqueré, Ishkomón, Caná Mujeres Kurdas, red de mujeres que tejen el futuro en Kurdistán. Este día, con la energía ancestral de las mujeres en diferentes territorios del mundo, nos unimos con la sabiduría de nuestras ancestras para hilar la palabra plural de sabiduría de las mujeres. ¿Puedes traducir, hermano?
So we are now starting this ceremonial fire for the Kurdistan women that we are struggling and they are fighting, and for all the women are struggling and fighting in the world.
Encendemos nuestro fuego ceremonial, así como nuestras ancestras mayas lo han celebrado desde hace miles de años en nuestros territorios, para tener una cercanía amorosa y saludar la historia de lucha y de resistencia de las ancestras del pueblo kurdo.
We started the fire like our ancestors do it thousands of years for celebration of the existence and the fight from the Kurdish, for the Kurdish women and the Kurdistan people.
Desde aquí enviamos nuestro abrazo espiritual para todas las hermanas kurdas que están librando batalla en Kurdistán, en Medio Oriente, para todas las hermanas, hermanos y hermanas que son presos políticos, refugiados, o que tienen movilidad política, o que están bajo resguardo.
From here, starting here, we send in our spiritual hook in this fire, and we acuerpamos. This is a word that means hug. We embody us all, our sisters in Kurdistan that we are fighting, and all the political pressure and people in political prisons fighting, and all the people that is in displacement from the original place. With this fire, we are hugging all.
Abrazamos a cada una de las hermanas que estamos dialogando este día para traer nuestras reflexiones plurales en la defensa de la vida, en la defensa de nuestro territorio cuerpo, de nuestro territorio tierra.
We're also acuerpamos all these persons that we are talking today, that we are defenders of the life and the territory and the earth and the women body.
Y a todas las familias, a todas las hermanas que están padeciendo los efectos pandémicos, para que este día también se acerque palabra sanadora, palabra amorosa, para traer fuerza, vitalidad a sus cuerpos y sus espíritus en medio de estos tiempos pandémicos.
We also started this fire and hope all the families and all the persons that are suffering the pandemic situation, the disease, and we send strong fuerza. We will be strong to face these pandemic times. Gracias.
Thank you so much. I'm very moved to welcome you all today to today's online seminar in the good spirits of the Indigenous Ceremonial Fire that was just lit for us today by our sister Lorena in Guatemala. And with these good spirits, I feel very, very excited to welcome you all again to today's online seminar with 3 inspiring women who will be sharing their reflections on what the pandemic has shown us and on how to organize in times of crisis. This event is organized by Jenny, the Kurdish Women's Office for Peace, as part of Women Weaving the Future, a network of different institutions and structures of the Kurdish women's movement. And Jenny is organizing monthly panels with activists from across the world to discuss how to weave a future together and across continents. Also, this event is part of a weekly seminar series on the history, the theory, and the practice of the Kurdish women's movement. For instance, next week on Sunday, there will be another online seminar on gynécologie, which you all are more than welcome to join as well, of course. But today, our 3 panelists, Lorena Cabnal, Benedetta Argentieri, and Abir Hassef, will talk to us about their reflections and struggles in the times of COVID-19 and the opportunities or even maybe necessities to change the current capitalist system and its colonial nation states that actually have been using the crisis itself to reorganize their systems of oppression and exploitation. And before starting, I would like to give some technical information. The panelists will have approximately 20 minutes each to speak, and you will be able to ask questions in written form here in the Zoom chat, as well as in the YouTube chat or in the comments function. We will gather these questions in the background and try to address all of them during the question and answer session. And I'm very, very honored now to introduce our fantastic speakers. As you already saw with the spiritual fire, Lorena Cabnal is here with us today. She is a native Maya and Xinca woman, an ancestral healer and territorial communitarian feminist. She is a defender of life and ancestral territories. She's a co-founder of a network of ancestral healers of territorial communitarian feminism from Ixumelu, Guatemala, in Abya Yala. We will share her input in form of a video, but she's here and she's happy to address all your questions. And she will partake in the discussion, and for that we have organized 2 translators who will be joining or who will be with us throughout the evening. Our second speaker will be from the land of revolution, from Rojava, Abir Hassef, who will be joining us from Rojava herself. She is a pharmacist and political social activist from Rojava. She was the director of the local health authority between 2016 and 19. She's a women's and human rights defender. And until 2019, she was a member of the Syrian Democratic Council and the Syrian Women's Council. Now she's a member of the Women's Council Coordination in Northern and Eastern Syria and the co-director of the medical faculty at Rojava University. Last but not least, our third speaker will be Benedetta Argentieri. She is an independent journalist and a director. Since 2014, she has been covering the war on ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Her work appeared on several international media, including Reuters and Vice magazine, the Sunday Times. In 2016, she co-directed Our War, a documentary on foreigners joining the Kurdish forces in Syria. Her latest feature documentary, I Am the Revolution, was presented at the DOC in New York City 2 years ago, and it focuses on the women's revolution. She also authored Sona Islam, a graphic novel about a young Moroccan woman who was lured into the Islamic State and was able to escape. And on top of all of that, she also has an MA in journalism and politics from the Columbia University in New York. And without further ado, I would like to give the floor to our speakers, starting with the video that Lorena was so kind for us to prepare. It has English subtitles. And before doing that, I would like to also ask everybody to switch off their microphones when we are watching the video and also when other panelists are speaking. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the discussions.
Ahí, canal y red de mujeres que tejen el futuro y movimiento de mujeres kurdas. Un abrazo, hermanas, hasta el otro lado, donde ustedes están, en esas tierras de Kurdistán, desde la red de sanadoras ancestrales del feminismo comunitario territorial en Iximulé, Guatemala, en el corazón de esta Abiyayala, la tierra ancestral que el colonialismo occidental llamó como América Latina y del Caribe. Para los pueblos ancestrales es Abiyayala, y desde aquí nuestro abrazo a la histórica lucha que ustedes también están batallando, porque ustedes también son inspiración para nosotras, las mujeres de pueblos ancestrales que defendemos la vida, que defendemos los territorios, y los territorios cuerpo y el territorio tierra de este lugar del mundo. Muchas gracias, hermanas, por invitarnos a compartir este espacio de diálogo para traer algunas reflexiones de esta propuesta feminista comunitaria territorial que ha nacido con nosotras acá en Iximulé, Guatemala, a partir de la defensa de los territorios ancestrales contra las grandes mineras, petroleras, hidroeléctricas, y contra todas las formas de opresión y de impunidad del Estado-nación colonial, pero también donde nuestro cuerpo, que es nuestro primer territorio de defensa, ha sido un espacio vital que no hemos postergado. Y desde aquí les abrazamos y vamos a traer esos dos hilos que hoy nos convocan para poder dialogar este día. En nuestra cuenta calendárica maya, hoy es un día que llamamos como Oshib y Mosh, la energía vital de las aguas. Y nos acompaña este día para dialogar también nuestra ancestra Berta Cáceres, Eliseth Ustum y todas las mujeres que de este lado y en cualquier lugar del mundo defendemos las aguas, las fuentes de los ríos, los bosques, la tierra. Así que nuestro abrazo para todas las hermanas que defienden la vida en todas las manifestaciones de sus resistencias y de sus luchas. Dos hilos con los que queremos aportar a este diálogo. ¿Qué es lo que la pandemia nos ha mostrado en este tiempo? Para nosotras es importante dialogar acerca de ¿qué es lo que se ha develado en este tiempo? Queremos iniciar diciendo que para nosotras hablar del territorio cuerpo es traer una constatación que esta pandemia ha reconfigurado su poder, dominio y control científico, positivista, a través de la medicina occidental hegemónica, y se ha reforzado con el capitalismo. Eso creo que es una de las claridades que debemos de tener, cómo se reconfigura el poder y la hegemonía del positivismo. Ahorita es todo pasa por la validación científica y la aprobación de los gobiernos y las políticas públicas y los presupuestos a nivel de estados-naciones coloniales, y por lo tanto hay una nueva reconfiguración del orden económico mundial, donde la disputa es nuestros cuerpos y los territorios, la tierra. ¿Qué es lo que la pandemia nos está mostrando, nos está dejando? Yo quisiera traer una reflexión acerca de cómo para nosotras es importante decir que esta crisis pandémica no hay que verla solo ahorita en las manifestaciones de los síntomas y de las preocupaciones o los miedos o el pánico que se nos ha querido internalizar como una medida de control poblacional mundial. Hay que recordar que nuestros pueblos y la resistencia histórica de las mujeres ha venido acuerpándose y haciendo luchas históricas contra formas patriarcales milenarias. De esas luchas contra las formas patriarcales milenarias viene la lucha de nuestras ancestras y de nuestras abuelas antes de las colonizaciones. Y no hay que dejar de verlo, porque acá estamos enfrentándonos a un acumulado, a un continuo histórico de violencia contra las mujeres y contra la tierra. Entonces, las formas patriarcales, nosotras decimos en nuestras maneras y nuestras interpretaciones mayas, decimos, bueno, aquí también hubo una forma patriarcal ancestral originaria que tenemos que seguir resolviéndonos, interpelándonos y sanando entre los pueblos ancestrales. El pueblo maya, por ejemplo, pueblos xinca, pueblos ancestrales. Pero luego también todo lo que ha venido con la colonización castellana, inglesa, francesa, portuguesa, todas las formas de colonización que han venido y se han impuesto. Todo el colonialismo internalizado, cómo se reconfigura, pero también el racismo. Ese racismo que también va a agarrar fuerza con el despojo, el saqueo, la violencia sexual, el genocidio. Las miles de abuelas, bisabuelas, nuestras generaciones, los que también fueron violentadas sexualmente a partir de las colonizaciones, cómo esto generó condiciones a través del despojo y del saqueo de nuestros territorios, y cómo entonces eso genera poder y opresión sobre los cuerpos, y estos cuerpos de memoria, presión de enfermedades y de pestes. Quiero también traer que uno de los elementos que es complejo y es fuerte, pero es importante también plantearlo, es que se crea un modelo económico en estos territorios. Hay una reconfiguración económica a partir del despojo, el saqueo y la esclavización de los cuerpos también de hermanas y hermanos negros que fueron traídos durante las colonizaciones. De allí que eso es un entramado histórico estructural de opresiones sobre los cuerpos y sobre la tierra. Esas opresiones traen etapas del capitalismo sobre nuestros cuerpos, sobre la tierra. Para nosotras, lo que la pandemia nos ha develado, estas manifestaciones nos develan, es que hemos entrado a otra etapa de este capitalismo que es patriarcal. Estamos ante algo que estoy nombrando como patriarcado capitalista neoliberal pandémico. Acá, los países que se disputan las hegemonías económicas y que lo hacen globalizante con toda la población mundial, no solo a través de las vacunas, por la disputa que hay ahorita de los cuerpos, de vacunar millones de cuerpos en la Tierra, creo que hay que traer claro de que la vida en el mundo está en riesgo y que la lucha y que tenemos una guerra declarada contra los cuerpos, que la lucha de las mujeres en el mundo es vital que también se reconfigure desde la pluralidad de saberes y haceres que ya nuestras ancestras, tremendas hermanas y mujeres guerreras, mujeres también con sabidurías plurales para poner el cuerpo en la línea frontal del ataque en esta pandemia. Creo que la pandemia nos está mostrando una nueva etapa de poder, de opresión, de privatización de los cuerpos, pero creo que esta nueva fuerza y reconfiguración y la disputa entre países con tal hegemonía y su positivismo, por eso hay que cuestionar e interpelar a la ciencia positivista occidental que mercantiliza los cuerpos a partir ahorita de los estudios y las investigaciones y las imposiciones de vacunas, de análisis de anticuerpos, de reacciones del organismo ante ciertos medicamentos, ¿sí? Todo está estructurado de tal manera para meternos pánico y pánico mundial, y hay que cuestionar, porque el positivismo ha sido una de las mayores hegemonías de poder, de control y de opresión sobre la vida. y sobre la vida en todos los pueblos, la construcción, ¿verdad? Y la manipulación asquerosa que se hace a través de los gobiernos, a través de los estados-naciones coloniales impuestos, siguen jugándole la lógica a ese capitalismo neoliberal pandémico. Por eso, hermanas, quiero aprovechar también para compartir un segundo hilo. ¿Qué estamos haciendo las comunidades, las organizaciones, las redes sanadoras ancestrales ante estas formas coloniales, racistas, pues, patriarcales, ¿verdad? De este capitalismo neoliberal pandémico? Queremos traer la memoria ancestral de nuestras abuelas, de nuestras bisabuelas, de las generaciones de mujeres, que una de sus formas de resistencia ha sido sanar para liberarnos en dignidad y para poder traer memorias de conciencia, de vida en este tiempo que nos tocó que nacer. Los pueblos ancestrales en cualquier lugar del mundo tenemos memoria inmunológica relacionada con todos los movimientos de los astros, del sol, de la luna. Me acompaña acá el solario, el calendario solar maya, pero también el calendario lunar xinca. Los cuerpos en relación con las fases de la luna, las mujeres, nuestras lunaciones, nuestra sangre. Mira cómo se llama Abhyayala, la sangre que corre libre por la tierra. Cómo revitalizar las mujeres en el mundo, la hermosa energía cósmica que habita en nuestros ovarios, porque los ovarios están sumamente conectados con las fases de la luna, porque nuestros ovarios son cíclicos. La ovulación es cíclica y es a la izquierda, no por ideología, ¿sí? Es hacia la izquierda el movimiento cíclico de los ovarios de las mujeres en el mundo. ¿Sabes por qué? Porque es una relación de armonización en la red de la vida, en el tzukar. Y en esa relación de vida, 28 días tarda la luna en dar vuelta a la tierra, que son los 28 días que las mujeres vamos a ir generando el óvulo, la maturación y el sangrado para proveer vida. Y no estoy hablando de vida cuando vamos a parir nada más, no, porque habrá mujeres que van a parir y otras que no, y otras que lo asumen, lo desean, y otras que no les convoca, u otras que sus cuerpos no fueron tejidos en la red de la vida para procrear, sino para traer vida en su pluralidad de existencias en dignidad. Para nosotras es vital, hermanas y compañeras, decir qué estamos haciendo. Creemos en la memoria ancestral inmunológica de los pueblos antes de que fueran creadas las formas occidentales hegemónicas de la medicina o de un pensamiento objetivo y positivista. Para nosotras, desde las epistemologías ancestrales, desde las formas ancestrales de medicina y de movimiento cósmico, estamos fortaleciendo las relaciones de vida de los cuerpos de las plantas y de los cuerpos de las mujeres, en qué fase de luna estamos para saber qué relación tiene la luna con las plantas. Y esa relación de la luna y el sol, lo que han nombrado como fotosíntesis, pero para nosotros es una relación de vida, para generar vida, porque en la red de la vida todo es vida. Esta planta está muy relacionada con mi cuerpo, con mi ser, porque la in utlaat, la at utlain. Esto es en idioma quechí, en castellano es porque tú soy yo y yo soy tú. Todo tiene relación de vida. Las plantas para nosotras es un despertar de la memoria sanadora en las mujeres y estamos compartiendo con hermanas, hermanos, hermanes en diferentes comunidades y territorios la recuperación, la revitalización de diferentes plantas que crecen, que nacen, para cultivarlas, para traerlas en estos momentos pandémicos, para poder hacer no solo una lucha contra el sistema capitalista y patriarcal y toda la manifestación de los síntomas del COVID, sino también lo estamos haciendo político. Algo que hemos generado con mayor conciencia es hablar del consumo del azúcar, por ejemplo. El azúcar es uno de los mayores inventos de opresión colonial que se impuso en la vida de los pueblos del mundo, porque los pueblos ancestrales no consumíamos azúcar. Miel es otra relación de vida. La fructuosa o el azúcar natural de los frutos orgánicos. Pero el azúcar, mientras más blanca y más refinada, está generando impresionantemente una toxicidad en los organismos. Y estamos diciendo, ¿quiénes fueron los que vinieron y usurparon y robaron territorios y generaron grandes extensiones y siembra de caña y todo lo que ha traído, por ejemplo, los ingenios? Y hoy por hoy, ¿a quién se le compra el azúcar? ¿Qué cuerpos están intoxicados, verdad? Y son diabéticos. ¿Y por qué entonces uno de los cuerpos vulnerabilizados en estos casos de pandemia son las personas diabéticas, por ejemplo? ¿Qué tiene que ver con el torrente sanguíneo, con tu sistema linfático? ¿Qué tiene que ver con que la cantidad de carga viral está en las fosas nasales, en tu laringe, en tu faringe, ¿verdad? En la entrada de tu tráquea, ¿sí? En los alvéolos pulmonares. Esto te está diciendo que el sistema linfático, tu sistema de defensas, está siendo atacado porque también estas rupturas coloniales han desterrado. Y eso es una lucha que seguimos haciendo los pueblos ancestrales, las formas alimentarias de nuestros cuerpos, porque esas formas alimentarias no mediadas por el capitalismo son formas alimentarias para la vida, que te proveen inmunidad, que te proveen a partir no solo de dos sabores, del dulce y del salado, como te lo impone la lógica también alimentaria, ¿verdad? Capitalista y occidental, sino que también te trae las plantas que generan otra inmunología, otras inmunoglobulinas como respuesta, ¿verdad?, ante la pandemia. Para nosotras, recuperar los baños, las fases lunares, las plantas, nuestro fuego ceremonial, nuestra meditación, nuestras maneras también de buscar a las mujeres con sus sabidurías plurales, es una forma de cómo las memorias ancestrales en este tiempo, al hacerlas políticas, nos llevan también a procesos y caminos de sanación. Porque la inut, la at, la in. Sanando tú, sano yo. Y sanando yo, sanas tú. Esa es la energía, la memoria, la vitalidad de los pueblos que caminan y que se levantan. Y desde las mujeres y desde las ancestras traen nuevas generaciones de vida, de lucha y de resistencia. Pues Bantesh Kaná, yo dejo la palabra por ahí para que sigamos dialogando en este espacio maravilloso, en este tejido de sentir la palabra para sanarnos también.
Thank you so much for sharing this very inspiring and moving video, and I'm very much looking forward to discuss further with you later. And also thank you for taking us beyond the binaries that are imposed on us people, especially the oppressed in this world, and what you called, Lorena, the pandemic neoliberal capitalism. And picking up also one of your words, everything has a life relationship. I would like to pass on the floor to our friend in Rojava, Abir Hassaf, and I'm looking forward to hear about what is happening in Rojava.
Good evening for everybody. At the beginning, I want to tell all of you thank you for everything. I'm very happy that our struggle as a Kurdish woman gives some hope for all the women around the world. And by the way, I want to wish the peace for the soul of the martyr Hafrin and all the martyrs of women movement around the world. Maybe our situation is somehow different from the other countries because of the crisis which we live in Syria now. All of Syria, we have about 10 years in deep crisis because of the war everywhere. and because of the ISIS, so we suffered from a lot of things in Syria. So when we started the face to face the coronavirus, it was the some maybe it's added for our problem. One of the biggest problems which all the world is suffering from it. And at the beginning, as everywhere, we have our self-administration here, and maybe we could make some peace for our people here in the northern and eastern of Syria. Maybe our situation now somehow better than in the inside of Syria. So at the beginning of the crisis, or maybe or when the pandemic began, our government, or maybe our leaders here urgent to be make resolutions and to start a quarantine to maybe to stop the spread of the virus everywhere, and they started and other measures as close schools and universities. The life was just stopped everywhere. But I want to say that the women's situation, even if we have our self organizations, our maybe begin from the women's house, or maybe from the women's policy or women's in every where women could work. But even if we have this situation, but the life inside houses, it was different somehow, because when women could in home home also she faced a lot of violence inside her house, and she also became one of the maybe can tell you as a add problem. So between we have some as static from the 23rd of March to 16th of May, we had some about 17 killed women, and about 8 suicides, about 18 women which tried to be safe themselves. And we have a lot about 300 situation with the beating and abuse recorded in the police department because of the male authoritarian mentality in here. I think that the situation maybe our situation better than the other sides of Syria, but we till now facing a lot of problem. And the maybe the other side, we have another problem with the Turkish occupation, because in the middle of the pandemic, and all around the world have urgent to save each other, and to make some maybe mutual aid to 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 protect themselves from the pandemic, from the virus in this time. just in this time, Turkish state started to bombing our territory and occupied the big part of our the northern and the eastern Syria, as Great P and Sarekanie, and continue bombing all civilian in civilian villages and cities in this area. So it was another problem which people here faced, and especially women here faced this problem. As you know, they have another as Turkish government, as Turkish state start to kill just women and make a lot of as you know, as martyr Habrin Khalaf or another woman in that time, about I think that about 100,070 women are now living in camps because of this occupation, and they live in various. They are suffering now in these camps without water, without any at least any help, how and without any protection, and especially in this special time with this pandemic everywhere. If you want to ask me something else, I could be answered.
Thank you so much for giving us, an overview about the current situation, which does not necessarily very promising, but maybe we can speak later in the discussion about the ways of, resisting these injustices and how the society organizes. But before that, I would like to now give the floor to Benedetta Agintieri. Yes, and I'm happy to give you the floor.
Thank you so much. First of all, let me thank the organizer, the Kurdish Women's Movement, for setting up this webinar that's very important and interesting in this time. As many of you might know, Italy was the first country to really get hit by the COVID-19 after China. Italy established a blueprint for other countries to follow. It all happened very quickly. The first cases were registered on January 31st, when 2 Chinese tourists tested positive in Rome. On February 21st, almost 3 weeks later, the first outbreak was registered in Lombardy. And the following day, on February 22nd, the first death was also registered. Overall, Italy has had almost 250,000 cases of corona and 35,000 deaths. At the beginning, the state and the government continued to give contradictory messages, as the scientific community was also divided between who were in denial and believed that this was just another influenza virus, and the ones who understood the gravity of the situation. For that, each and every communication was extremely cryptic and difficult to decode, since there was always somebody ready to rebuke any comments. Politicians also used the virus as an occasion for electoral purposes, especially at the beginning. Matteo Salvini, the Northern League leader, and others far right, and not just, politicians have been calling any early restrictions inappropriate and continued to be seen in restaurants and bars without any protecting gear. Saying also to people to come out, to go to restaurants. Don't be afraid was the underlying message. In the meantime, death and positive cases were ramping up and multiplied by the day. As the pandemic expanded outside the epicenter in Lombardy, the health system was incapable to face the emergency. And then the Prime Minister, Giuseppe Conte, decided to declare the state of emergency for the first time after World War II, which is still going on today. The state of emergency allows the government to lock down the country over and over again without asking the parliament for it. So on March 8, almost 60 million people, which is the Italian population, were placed in isolation in a de facto state police for over 2 months. Thousands of agents set up checkpoints in cities, provinces, and regions to screen citizens and fine whoever was out without an approved reason. Police drones were flying over our heads, as well as helicopters. Cameras recorded every moment they could catch, and agents would go to check and follow up. Military were patrolling the streets, geared up for a war zone. This situation, of course, was extremely worrisome because of the suspension of any individual rights. There have been cases of police harassing citizens, mistreating people at every occasion. In some cases, even beating young students who want to put flowers on partisans' memorials. Agents even fined homeless people for not being at home. All of this felt very dystopian. Overall, the empty streets and police rounds were terrifying, and everything was very gloomy, that most of the people didn't want to leave the house at the end. The idea put forward by the government was that militarization could defeat the virus. This is basically the practicality of the early state narrative around the virus, which was an enemy to defeat, and that we were at war. Therefore, militarization and restriction of individual freedom and rights were the only solution that the government could think about, saying that these measures were needed to check people who were not acting responsibly. Besides of a couple of specific cases, the data and the fines that we have from police says otherwise. People stayed at home. People did wear protective gears. In any case, from March 8, no one was allowed outside the house unless they had to go to work or to buy groceries. In other words, the only way to get out from the house was to either consume or produce. And this is the thing. While media mainstream pushed for an individual responsibility, as if it was the citizen's responsibility to cure the disease, the government left almost 70% of essential production industries open, and workers didn't have any adequate protective gear, so they also fell sick. This is true for health workers too. What is interesting in Lombardy, the area where I am, which is in Milan, and the region of Milan, and as I said, the most hit by the virus, the health system was regarded as one of the best of Europe, though it completely collapsed under the pressure. In the past 10 years, regional government have cut spending on the public health system and diverted the investment on the private sector. Furthermore, during the emergency, there have been cases of corruption amongst the regional government. It is in cases like this that you can see and live the fragility of the system and how it's not working for the people. So while undergoing this health crisis, the society was also facing its worst nightmare. The state narrative and this constant contradiction created a feeling of fear and suspicion. People started insulting others on the streets for whatever reasons, sometimes just for walking down the street with no shopping bags. But most importantly, the house was not safe for everyone. There has been a spike on involuntary psychiatric treatment. To many, especially women, the isolation had a devastating effect, both psychologically and physically. According to DIRE, a woman association against violence, the helpline for victims of violence has received 74.5% more requests in this period than the previous year. Forced cohabitation aggravates situations with underlying violence going on. We have seen it not just in Italy, but everywhere. This trend started straight away, and organizations asked the government and Italian state to increase the funds for anti-violence center, though nothing has come true. Women's health was also under attack in this period. Abortions were almost impossible, and for over 2 months, women's clinics were only intaking pregnant patients while everyone else had to hope for the best. Italian society is characterized by deeply rooted gender stereotypes and widespread sexism, both explicit and implicit. As the school stopped at the end of February, a lot of women found themselves with double, if not triple, workloads. Women in Italy are mainly employed in the third sector, large retailers and logistics. Especially the latter are regarded as essential services, so everything was opened. even during the lockdown. So according to data, while the virus is less deadly for women, but in large retailer, 73% of the new infected were actually women, again, left unprotected, to cope with the virus. In the city of Milan, the crisis was particularly felt. It was clear that a lot of people would lose their jobs and a lot of families would be in need. So also soup kitchens were closed, leaving the most vulnerable without food. After the first few days of lockdown, the solidarity brigades were formed. A group of people, initially small, then it grew to almost 1,000 participants, organized and divided the city in areas where they could operate to deliver groceries to sick people or old people that couldn't get out. The brigades also collected food to then be delivered to indigent families and also prepared meals for the homeless. In fact, a number was set up on purpose, and whoever was in need could call and request a food basket. What was extremely interesting, I think, in this period and about the brigade was the composition of the group, a mix of political activists, young students, and average citizens who decided that wanted to help. And beside the regular brigades that were delivering food and these kind of things, others also were formed. Due to the high number of phone calls to the helpline, a group of therapists started the Basaglia Brigade, which the main focus was psychological relief, or the Brigella Brigade, which brought theater and performance in the courtyards of popular neighborhoods. Overall, in Milan, the brigades delivered 4 tons of food to 4,000 families. This model spread well beyond Milan and Italy, and we have seen spreading of solidarity brigades also in other European countries, as well as the US. The brigades are and have been a wonderful experience, but we should see the contradictions and also analyze the fact that the crisis deepened the cracks in the system, creating a void and the possibility to create alternatives. It is important to distinguish welfarism, which de facto aid the system in the moments of needs by not challenging the status quo, from creating parallel structures that could be autonomous and self-administered. Giving a new perspective and working on showing the possibility of constructing a tangible alternative should be an objective of movements around the world. There is a lot of room to work on this, and I think that this is the time to be creative and inventive, evolving practices to this new world. The future looks gloomy, well beyond the corona crisis, as disasters are becoming more and more frequent, as scientists warn of other pandemics, even more deadly. It is clear that our new reality looks way more like the one during corona than the one we had even a year ago. The women movement, more than other, could offer a feasible and practical solution to face this new reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Benedetta, for your input and overview about how the pandemic affected Italy in particular and women also in particular, or maybe more general. We basically finished the input session where our speakers were invited to speak and to give us some information first. And now we will have a question and answer session, or let's call it more democratically, a dialogue between everyone who is participating today. And I think I will just exploit my position as chair or my role as chair to ask a first round of questions, if that's okay, and invite everybody else who's listening now and who's watching us to also share your thoughts and questions, as I said, in the chat here on Zoom or in the YouTube chat or in the comments function. We will gather them all, we see them all, and we will address them to the speakers. I was thinking when I was listening to all 3 panelists, that despite being embedded in different political contexts and in different parts of the world, in different geographies, I was wondering what is, I was hoping maybe you could elaborate a bit about the common denominator between the peoples across the world facing this pandemic that affects everybody equally, or maybe not so much equally. and especially affects women to a particular degree, as we also heard from Rojava and also from Italy, the rise in domestic violence, etc. So what can we learn from each other was one of the questions that I was thinking about. Despite being so much located, located in so much different worlds and contexts, but what is our common denominator and how can we learn from each other? Then also connected to that, we could observe that worldwide, mostly people were affected by this pandemic, that are already those oppressed by the racist and capitalist system. Thinking also about, for instance, very recently, the Kurdish populations in Turkey who are being cut off from water supplies and electricity, for instance, in Cizre, in the Turkish southeast, or in the Kurdish north. And all the problems of supply and medical care and the embargo on Rojava, the interest of imperialist powers in what they call Latin America, but how our indigenous communities suffer under the pandemic, and Black people in the US. So what could be our way to organize as women, as people from across the world, to organize in a way that we not only challenge this oppression, but also free ourselves and overcome the imposed binary thinkings, the imposed systems of oppression and exploitation and racism and patriarchy. So, what can we learn from each other, and what is the way to organize if there is a common denominator? This is what I would like to, or what I would like you to elaborate on, if you agree, maybe starting with our sister in Guatemala, Lorena, if she wants to start.
Sí. Creo que podríamos, escuchando a las otras hermanas, pareciera que con contextos tan lejanos, pero a la vez con efectos pandémicos patriarcales muy comunes.
We can say that hearing also the other friends and comrades, that even if there are such different contexts, geographical contexts, the effects of the pandemic are common.
Pero algo que a mí me hace ver que uno de los efectos que está ejerciendo esta pandemia sobre nuestros cuerpos es que para mí está clarísimo que esta es una pandemia patriarcal.
We can say that for her, one of the first evidence is that the effect, looking at the effect of this pandemic on bodies, we can say that is a patriarchal pandemic.
Estamos hablando de cómo han aumentado las formas de violencia contra las mujeres en este contexto pandémico. Se está hablando del incremento del femicidio a nivel mundial. Ahí tenemos que decir que también la agresión sexual del quédate en casa, el estar viviendo con el agresor, va a ser otra dimensión para traerla como un común que se está manifestando en diferentes territorios mundialmente.
So we see the increasing of violence against women, we see the global increasing of feminicide, and we can say that the sexual aggression that is inside the slogan, stay at home, with your aggressor, is one of the first common points that we can see between different territories.
Cómo hay una también reconfiguración del militarismo en contexto de guerra, como también en países que se dice que tenemos firmada la paz, pero realmente nos damos cuenta que el militarismo sigue siendo una herramienta compleja de control poblacional. En Guatemala, todos los días, todas las noches tenemos estado de sitio, por ejemplo.
Another element is the reconfiguration of militarism, both in war contexts, but also in those countries that are supposed to be in peace. Militarism also in those countries is a tool for population control, and in Guatemala they have everyday stage estadio de asedio, like an emergency state every day.
Y pienso también que la intencionalidad de agudizar el empobrecimiento mundial de los pueblos y particularmente de las mujeres está siendo bastante fuerte y complejo en estos momentos.
Another element is the intentionality, the will of increasing the poorness of people, but also of, and mostly of women. It is another strong and, yes, common element.
Y con la otra parte de la pregunta, ¿cómo nos podemos organizar la gente del planeta, de la Tierra, para emanciparnos en este contexto? Creo que para nosotras, como mujeres mayas, es importante decir que para nosotras es importante ver que la sanación del COVID, de los síntomas del COVID-19, hay que llevarlo a una dimensión política también y espiritual.
Yes, and about the other question about how we organize as people of the planet Earth for emancipation, for the Maya women, it's important to see that healing the COVID symptoms must be politicized, must be taken as a political process and as a spiritual process too.
No podemos ver solo el COVID como algo parcial, porque los efectos del COVID están rodeados por otras memorias también que hay que sanar para tomar este tiempo también como una oportunidad política ante este nuevo orden económico mundial, porque podemos sanar del COVID, podemos tener una inmunidad fortalecida contra el COVID, podemos ser asintomáticas contra el COVID, pero también es importante reconocer que junto a esto, sanar con la memoria de los pueblos, que eso sería una lucha contra la forma del capitalismo colonial, pero a la vez sanar las opresiones internalizadas que nos deja el machismo, el racismo, la misoginia, la homofobia, todas las formas de opresión, van a darnos posibilidad de dignificar nuestra existencia en este contexto. Pues Banquero. Gracias.
But we cannot see just like a partial image of this pandemic. Because the effects are are embedded in other memories of oppression. And so looking at these other memories, we can face a political opportunity to struggle against the global economic order. We can have a strong immunity against COVID, but the important is to recognize that we have to heal the memories of the peoples in the fight against capitalism, but also to heal machism, racism, misogyny, homophobia, so all the other issues of oppression that are around this COVID. This will be a way of healing ourselves in another level. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Well, listening to what COVID-19 has revealed to us, I would now like to again ask Abir Hassef in Rojava. You spoke about basically the same question, but you spoke about the two challenges at the time that you are facing. First of all, gender-based violence inside the houses, after the population was called to try to avoid social contact, to stay in the house, but then you had an increase of gender-based violence and women murder and suicides, and then the challenges that are imposed on the people in Rojava because of the Turkish occupation. Can you give us also some insights about how is the democratic confederal model and also the self-administration dealing with these challenges, and what are the ways for Kurdish women and for non-Kurdish women in Rojava, I mean for women in general, to organize against the systems of oppression?
As you know, our project in Rojava as self-administration is something unique project around the world. And in this project, we could grow some a kind of democracy between the society and go back into the make the relationship or the contact with the natural society. As you know, I told you that Syria live in deep crisis in Syria. All the health system and the political system and everything is so fragile in structure in especially in health system in all of Syria. But here in Rojava we could make something because of this self-administrations, because of this democracy project here in Rojava, because of the women's movement which could organize themselves into own organizations, institutes in the society, and they could make them build their own system here in Rojava. That system which is very close into the natural society and could protect a lot of women and a lot and make the maybe women's make women's situation better than the other side or the other cities in Syria. I wanted to tell you about our health system in the beginning. Our system here, I can tell you that it was very fragile here in the northern and the eastern Syria because of all of the embargoes. If we wanted to make some medicine, we have to make to take this medicine from the inside of Syria, from Damascus, from the other maybe cities, because we didn't have any factories here. We didn't have anything to make something else. But because of our because of our organizations, because of our society, because of we tried to build to start to build. We didn't have any. I can tell you, we didn't have just a few hospitals here, and these hospitals are destroyed by ISIS, have been destroyed by ISIS and by Syria regime. But we started to reorganize this and rehabilitate all these centers, health centers, and I can tell you that even if we don't have enough enough maybe economical side or safety side or political side. Even if we have all of these problems, we could make something, and we could protect our people here in Rojava especially. We have the fewest number from of people with coronavirus in the time when all of Iraq and Turkey and inside of Syria, thousands of people are now are suffering or they are they have disease in all of these areas, but the self organization of the society in one side, and in the women especially, because women, I can know the women as the special the which could protect the culture and take care of the all of the society and their health situation. I can see that, but nowadays I told you that we had some problems inside house, because even if we make all of this, maybe we could live about 6 years in democracy project, but inside houses we still have some male mentality. We couldn't change all of this mentality, male mentality inside our houses, and this is one of the biggest problem we are fighting with. But I told you that we have another problem with the Turkish side, Turkish as occupation, as trying all the time to Turkey and Turkish state and its mercenary. They make a lot of violence against civilian people here around in the northern and eastern of Syria, and they as example, they bombed the water, the source of water, and they cut the water for about 500,000 people in Al-Hasaki city in the midst of the pandemic. And this point, this point is one of the biggest. I can tell you that the biggest violence against the humanity, because when the virus will spread, it's the virus doesn't know if the people are Kurdish or Turkish or Arab or any other nationality. This I can tell you that this violence, it was against all the humanity around the world, because when you make something as this point, you give the virus to be spread in these areas. So I think.
Thank you very much. We have a question, but before going to pose the question to our panelists, I would also like Benedetta to share her thoughts about, you already mentioned ways to organize, but maybe, you know, again, how, because Italy is in the European West, so what are the learning processes maybe from how, for instance, women or the people in Rojava deal with the situation, and how, you know, what is our common denominator in organizing? Maybe this is an aspect our audience would like to hear. And then I'm going to pose the question that was, you know, written in the chat. Thank you.
I think that this is a very interesting time, because for, you know, like, I do not remember in my lifetime that, you know, like the whole population of the world actually faces the same disease, the same virus, with, you know, everything that is connected to it. Of course, the reactions we've seen from governments do differ depending on where they are, even in the hemisphere. Like the Western world has reacted, or Europe has reacted in certain ways, then America reacted in different ways, and so on. And depending also, I think that what is interesting to see the common denominator of let's say governments that have head of governments that are inclined to the right wings, or even regime style. So we've seen, you know, like how, for instance, Donald Trump and Bolsonaro and others had the same kind of views of the virus, especially in very much denial, especially at the beginning. And there is a common thread about, you know, saving the economy, saving the system. You know, this is one of the talks that we've been hearing the most about how to face the virus. And I think it's interesting because it also underlines the absolute lack of perspective that the governments around the world have about how to proceed. You know, in what's happening right now is that we might, in Europe especially, we might be facing a second wave of lockdowns, and the corona, most probably in the fall or so, everybody's saying, might rise again. And we've seen how Spain is going into lockdown again, and France is thinking about it for the next couple of months. So what to do, how to organize ourselves? I think it's, you know, the questions that everybody is asking ourselves. For sure, you know, panels like this and exchanging visions, exchanging, you know, not just perspective, but also how we face during this time, you know, the crisis is extremely important, because as the virus is one, you know, we should try to, you know, address an appropriate response for everything. For sure, I think that the teachings of Rojava, the democratic confederalism, and how to organize a society in a time of pandemic is extremely important, because it does give an alternative, you know, to the system. It does give an alternative to what, you know, society is telling you to do. You know, there are a lot of different ways that we could think on how to organize ourselves. But one thing I think it's very important, especially for women, is finding ways to break the isolation that the lockdown puts you in. I think technology gives them wonderful tools on how to break isolation and not feeling left out from, you know, like whatever it's happening. And also the fact that you might be able to find new tools through sharing experiences. I think also this is very important, because each context is obviously a little bit different. So what might work in Guatemala, for instance, might not work for Italy, and vice versa, you know, because that's also to take into consideration. But I think that the first steps is for sure greater communication, and then finding ways and using technology to the advantage of the movement, you know, especially during these times. I think that this should be a roadmap on how to go forward.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to address the question to the panelists. It's open to everybody, so whoever feels like answering it can just jump on the microphone, basically. So the question is, and I will read it out. Our friend here says, I am puzzled as to what action the panelists would have preferred governments to take. In the UK, our government relied on and supported strongly voluntary and non-compulsory lockdown with social distancing of primary concern. We also have had one of, if not the highest rates of infection and death. And then she also added, we might add that we also have had a rise in violence against women. We completely agree that the inequalities have been exacerbated and are more evident, but on the whole, I think the government is acting in opposition to the desire of the people to be free of and control the virus. So, yeah, who would like to address this question?
Can I address the question?
Yes.
So I think it's a very interesting question. You know, the problem, I think, is not the question of the, you know, being in lockdown per se, but it's everything that, you know, around it. For instance, children have been completely forgotten by not just the states, but by everyone, you know, like as if you can put children in isolation for 7-8 months and not having psychological impact on children. This is just an example. Or, you know, I would have preferred the government, the Italian state, for instance, to understand that people, of course, with masks and distancing, should have gone to have a walk instead of having to go out just to buy. You know, this is like, is a very important difference on how to address the issue. Because as I said, you know, during the presentation, the idea for the Italian state was just to go out, produce and consume, and that's it. Everything else was completely forbidden. I think that there should be a kind of balance between, you know, measures and also, you know, like, and how to treat the citizens. You know, like another very huge problem that we had in Italy is the waste of public fundings. Like in Milan, for instance, in 3 weeks, they opened, you know, like in 2 months, they built a hospital out of the blue. Then just for spending about $2 million, not 2 million euros, and sorry, 21 million euros, and just 4 patients went through, and that's it. So this is a huge waste of public money that should have been directed, let's say, into family councils, or, you know, or anti-violence centers, that kind of things. So you could see how the state is just protecting itself and basically production, and that's it.
Thank you, Benedetta. Maybe our 2 other panelists, would you like to say something on the question? So how the government should have acted instead, especially given the high infection and death toll rates? Heva, maybe you, yeah.
I think that the coronavirus and this pandemic showed us how we live in fake world. How all of these just symbols, just slogans around of us, they are fake. Our health system, which couldn't give some oxygen for few patients, and I think that coronavirus showed us a lot of things about this system. So I think that all of us, we have to go back into our inside us, humanity inside us. How can we make the relationships between us, the communication between us, between the society? Because all of the other side of the countries, the government, the states are something fake. They're just slogans, just way to make control against people, against society, and to make control of and could as much as take all make maybe economical side, or maybe make a profit from the society, or from the resources of which the people are inside. So I think that all of us have to return inside us, because when people knew themselves at the first, and the liberation of the other people, they can make they have to respect this communication, and they can protect themselves and their societies in the other side. Especially this way is especially is for women. These words. I think that coronavirus came in to separate or to sort the society into weak and strong, poor and maybe very rich. And I think that and the governments are use this virus to make the latest the last its control against or on the peoples which live around inside countries.
Thank you. If our sister Lorena also wants to add a few words, or if not, she can also pass. But if so, again, the question was, how should have the government or the governments, especially in the UK, acted differently given the high infection rates and death toll? Is in interest to respond to that question? Otherwise, I have one question for Benedetta in the chat.
Sí, yo quisiera aprovechar, ¿verdad? Porque sé que es un tiempo maravilloso también el que tenemos ahora para poder compartir un poco también qué estamos haciendo desde los pueblos. Y aunque sé que puedo hacer toda una reflexión de toda la impunidad, de la corrupción que hay en nuestro país, quiero aprovechar a compartir un poco de qué estamos haciendo contra la pandemia en las comunidades.
She said that it's important for her to take advantage for sharing in this beautiful moment of discussion what we are doing as communities and as people. So she could have talked about impunity and corruption in Guatemala state, but maybe it's the time to talk about what we are doing as community, as people, to face this virus.
Una de las primeras urgencias que sentimos que era importante activar eran nuestras formas ancestrales de resiliencia, porque empezamos a darnos cuenta de que esto traía una carga emocional muy fuerte, no solo contra la vida de las mujeres, ¿verdad? Sino también, como decía, ¿verdad? Ya anteriormente la hermana, contra la niñez y la juventud.
So one of the first urgency, it was to activate ancestral forms of resilience, because they understood that this situation as a big emotional charge that was not just against women, as another friend said before, but also against young people and children.
Algo que empezamos a ver inmediatamente es que teníamos que crear sostenibilidad emocional, pero también física, de respuesta inmunológica, espiritual, decimos nosotras, como las formas simbólicas ante los duelos masivos que empiezan a haber en comunidades y que no van a llevar las formas cotidianas de nuestros entierros, que son sumamente espirituales.
So that she said that they first understood that it was important to create sustainability, emotional sustainability, but also physical and also spiritual one. So to renew the symbolic and spiritual form embedded in their communities.
Empezamos a traer los momentos simbólicos, espirituales, teniendo clara la tecnología, pero haciendo un aprovechamiento político de la tecnología. Nunca antes habíamos hecho una ceremonia espiritual virtual, y eso empieza a acercarnos simbólicamente, visualmente o de manera auditiva a comunidades que están viviendo el duelo violento, porque las formas o los protocolos como están siendo enterrados los muertos es así, de manera violenta.
So they start to retake and to practice symbolical moments, spiritual moments, trying to use strategically the technology. Because she said that before that moment we have never did a ceremony online, but it has been a tool to be close to the communities that were living the violent death and the effect of this violent death in the communities, because the way of managing death during the virus was so violent.
Hemos hecho una convocatoria a las mujeres con sus sabidurías de sanación, de medicina maya, a las mujeres comadronas ancestrales o a las mujeres que reciben los partos. Hemos hecho una convocatoria a las mujeres que tienen sabiduría con las hierbas, que tienen maneras de curar con el agua, con el fuego, a las guías espirituales, para que entre todas podamos también tejer esas formas de sanación en las comunidades con nuestras maneras ancestrales.
So they made a call for different women who had some specific and ancestral wisdom and knowledges, women that could work with the children, with plants, and care and make process of healing with water, with fire. And so they make this open call in order to put together different forms of healings between women and give it back to the community.
Invitamos a la población en los espacios virtuales que tenemos a que busquen y se acerquen a su mamá, a su abuela, a sus familiares, que tienen también sus conocimientos y sus sabidurías ancestrales, porque también cuestionamos que nos hemos quedado dependiendo mucho en esta crisis pandémica de la medicina colonial occidental y que la memoria de los pueblos también tiene memoria contra pandemia ya de las colonizaciones que vinieron. Y si aquí está vivo el pueblo maya contra genocidios y pandemias coloniales, es porque hay sabiduría para levantarnos.
So they invite the population to be close to their relatives that maybe had some ancestral knowledges, because they understood that we depend, and mostly during this pandemic, we depend a lot from the Western hegemonic medicine, while people have ancestral memories of colonization that can help against colonization, that can help to deal with this pandemic, and mostly the Mayan people. So they had faced some colonial pandemics in the past, the genocide, so they had tools to face this moment.
La esperanza de la vida de los pueblos no está basada en que nos resuelva esta pandemia del Estado-nación colonial. Creo que hay que decir que la organización de las autoridades ancestrales en estos territorios es vital en estos tiempos, y hace pocos días el presidente se acercó a las comunidades maya cachiqueles en un lugar acá en San Juan, Comalapa, con una actitud súper racista. Y creo que hoy también las comunidades y los pueblos tenemos claro que las formas de vida se armonizan también en este tiempo, desde los pueblos, desde las mujeres, desde niñez y juventud, que es vital su memoria violentada en el encierro en estos tiempos, para juntas todas, todos y todes, en su pluralidad, levantarnos.
She said that it's important to not to delegate the life of the people in the solution of the colonial national state, and that the organization of the ancestral authorities in the communities is vital, is crucial now. Some days ago, the president, she said, the president of Guatemala, went to the Mayan communities, to the indigenous communities of a particular place, and he dealt with them with a lot of racism. So she said that in this moment, community and people have to be together, and the memory of women, of the young people should be shared in order to stand up and to face this moment.
Thank you very much. I have one more question to Benedetta, and then one more question to everybody, whoever wants to answer it, and then I think we're closing the rounds of question. But as for the question for Benedetta, thank you all to the panelists for their perspective. My question relates to Benedetta's point about the distinction between welfarism, either making demands of the state or stepping in to do the labor due to the ongoing crisis of care under capitalism that the pandemic has further exposed, and putting our energies into projects that can sustain themselves autonomously. In practice, this feels like turning people away who need help. Benedetta, this question was addressed to you, if you have a few words to share.
I don't think it's a way to turn people away. This is not concern the people that you're actually going to help, but is how you organize yourselves. You know, the thing is that what we've noticed that it's very easy, especially in this time, to do welfarism and just aiding the system in the moments of need, because the system, the municipality of Milan in this case with the brigades, was not able to meet, the problems that arise from the pandemic. They were not able to, they didn't have the number, the physical numbers. So the brigades, the voluntary brigades, stepped in and basically helped, literally thousands of families. But what is the difference between welfarism and giving a new perspective? Is how you organize yourself. What are you bringing? So is it enough to bring just a box of food and say goodbye? Or is it possible to build something else with that community? If like people start organizing in communities, in small communities, especially in urban areas, like in a place like Milan that has 1.2 million citizens, like people, starting from a courtyard, starting from I don't know, a small building, is how you organize and how you bring the help. This has to be something, a relationship that you develop with the people, and also you should start putting forward a political program that goes beyond welfarism. So it doesn't really turn people away. It's how you approach, I think, the problem, how you actually deal on the organizational level. And I think that like the experience that Rojava and the Kurdish movement is actually extremely explanatory on how to organize an alternative to the system. And this, the pandemic, especially in Italy, created that void, that which is possible to insert yourself with a real and tangible alternative. Because this is the problem. Sometimes, when we talk about alternatives, sometimes they're very far away from the practicality, but this is an opportunity to actually have, this both parts.
Thank you very much. And then we have one more question that also can be used maybe as like a final question that also allows our panelists to elaborate a bit more on maybe, a final thought that they would like to share. So the question is, many people have observed that countries with women presidents and prime ministers have better handling of the pandemic and have lower death rates. What do you think this shows in terms of women's approaches to leadership? But also, what are the limitations of this taking place within a nation-state framework? Since we are here in one of the online webinars of how to weave a future together, organized by the Kurdish Women's Movement, I think it makes sense to maybe, end with an answer to this question and maybe elaborate a little bit more on the limitations of the nation-state framework and think of a final statement for this panel. Whoever would like to start, I'm open.
Yo quisiera decir que a mí me parece que las mujeres en el mundo tenemos también una memoria muy milenaria, ancestral, sanadora. Y creo que los aportes de sabiduría a partir de la experiencia acumulada que tenemos de enfrentar las múltiples opresiones nos da otra interpretación de cómo buscar justicia y equidad en las relaciones de vida. De allí que administremos, voy a decir así, pues de mejor manera. Entonces,
Lorena said that women in the world has a millenary ancestral healing memory. We have an accumulated experience to deal different kind of oppressions. And so from these experiences, we can bring other interpretation to create justice and to face this situation. So this is maybe the reason why we do better.
Obviamente, entre las limitaciones que tenemos las mujeres es que el orden simbólico y jerárquico del mundo está pues con un ordenamiento patriarcal, colonial, racista, capitalista y neoliberal. Pero creo que también tenemos sabiduría plural. Y creo
Okay. But of course, we have some limitations that are embedded in the symbolic and hierarchical order, the war order that is patriarchal, colonial, racist, capitalist, and neoliberal. But we also have plural knowledges.
Y entonces creo que por eso es que abrimos nuestro ser a la pluralidad de existencias. Y por eso es que hacemos un llamado a la conciencia, al despertar de la conciencia en este tiempo, porque somos también hermanas que estamos haciendo visible en este tiempo pandémico la situación de las defensoras en riesgo político por defender sus territorios ancestrales, pero también a las hermanas defensoras de su cuerpo, las hermanas trans, las hermanas cuerpo plural intersexual, a las trabajadoras sexuales, a todas las manifestaciones de vida que también están viviendo los efectos de esta pandemia. Son limitaciones fuertes, también estamos haciendo alianzas para enfrentar y defender la vida.
Yes, so for this reason, we open our being to the plurality of existence, and we make a call for our consciousness to raise. And we are sisters that trying to make visible the situation of the defenders of their territories, of their ancestral territories, but also of their bodies. So the trans, intersex, sex workers, sisters. So all the different manifestations of life that in this moment are facing the terrible effects of the pandemic. So we must create alliances in order to defend life.
Thank you very much. Heval Abir, do you like to comment and make a final statement?
Yes, I think about your question, I wanted to tell you something about it. I agree with you that where is the woman, the society or the community is more healthier. It's because of the nature of the woman, which take care of everything, of everybody, and could give everyone a lot of intention, more love, more peace. So I think that even if we in our democracy system we prefer the joint presidency in every joint, really. Everywhere we prefer that we will work together, not just women or just men. Everywhere we have the both view, the both side working together, and to make the whole view of for every problem which they facing. So I think that because of the nature of the woman's nature, I agree with them that the countries with women leader, maybe they will be more healthier than the other. But in the last moment, I wanted to say something about the capitalism system, which try to make the more control as authority control about the society. Nowadays, it's the same period like 100 years ago when we in the first world, when the world changed everything, the changed have reorganized the system, world system. Nowadays, I think that we are facing the same situation. We going to the capitalist system going to change to change everything. The life system, political system, country system. In that time, a lot of people, there were a lot of genocides. Nowadays, I think that we have maybe we have the same situation or in the life situation, but with this with some difference in in the past. We could knew who is our enemy. Nowadays, we don't see anything. We are facing something unknown enemy, and a lot of people maybe will die, will be they will make another kind of genocides with the biological maybe weapons, and we have to be very care of these moments, and we have to take care of our lives, because if they I know that the capitalist system is very strong, and they have their maybe details, or maybe their machine mechanisms to pass this, to make this their project. But we have to try to stay against these projects, and we have to protect our culture, our nature, to keep the life, to keep our humanity, and to not to be just a number in the world's capitalist system. Thank you for everyone. I hope I could told you something maybe. Thank you for everything.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Benedetta, maybe you also a few words?
Yeah, I don't have much else compared, to add to what Havalaber and Lorena has said. I think it was a striking the attitude that women prime ministers have had compared to head of states that were completely in denial. So we have seen the cases of New Zealand, Iceland, where straight away their prime ministers, in this case women, took the threat very seriously and reacted appropriately to the threat, and they achieved what a lot of other countries couldn't, which is to contain the spread and eventually arrive to zero contagions, because this is what's happening to New Zealand. Of course, it's a question of approach. It's a question on how with the threats and everything, despite the fact that you are in the framework of nation state, which has intrinsically a domination part of it. and continuing pushing for a capitalistic system that is extremely dynamic. You know, this is the thing about the capitalistic system. It's extremely dynamic, and whenever it finds itself in a moment of weakness, how it could be right now, you know, has the, you know, the flexibility to adapt to new moments. And this is why it's we should be very careful, you know, when we think about this, and you know, we should really analyze how fast the system is able to change and to readapt. But overall, you know, it's a question of dynamics. I think it's very important to continue, you know, all these talks and sharing. And of course, you know, we wish that more women could become prime ministers, but always being aware and knowing that the framework that is not changing. So, you know, there is this double kind of standard. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for the final comments, but also for the whole panel in general. I know that online seminars can be a bit exhausting. This is why I'm expressing my gratitude that you all agreed to participate in this very important, I think, panel discussion and very current and timely topic. I would like to bring to the attention of, you know, our audience maybe that while we were discussing and listening to our panelists, our sisters in Guatemala, as you saw maybe with Lorena in her picture, they lit a fire for us, and it's called the ancestral ceremony. So they light a fire to send us good spirits and to revisit the memory of our ancestors. And she told us at the beginning that her friends and sisters and women were watching us, and they did this fire for us as well. And especially from our perspective as you know, people who work on the Kurdish issue or are part of the Kurdish women's movement, it is a very special day also, thinking of tomorrow's 6th yearing of the genocide against Yazidi people, just to also renew our memory on what happened 6 years ago. Since then, we still have 60% of Yazidi people displaced in the camps. They cannot return to their homeland, to their territory in Shanghai, and 2,000 women are still in captivity. And I think having this kind of dialogue today, also with our indigenous sisters in Guatemala, with you, Benedetta, in Italy, and with Hevarabe, and in the land of revolution, as I love to call it, I think it is very, very important and special that we had this discussion, especially with an accompanying ritual that renewed our ancestral memory. So to close this panel, and with the words of Lorena, everything has a life relation. Next week, you can also join another panel, which will be on genealogy. Genealogy, as you might have, you know, heard already, is a new system of knowledge that is based on women's experience and women's knowledge. And I would really, really encourage everybody to join the panel. It will be with Yasemin Andan. She's a member of the Genealogy Committee in Europe. Next week, Sunday, 9th of August, 7 p.m. as always. And before closing, I would also like to express a very big thank you to the translators and also all the organizers and our friends in the background that have been, you know, helping to coordinate everything and to bring us all together. Thank you very much. I hope to see you next week as well. Sending all my love and solidarity.